My worst fear had now become a reality. We were under attack by unknown invaders, and now in combat, battling a war mere feet from our mailbox. I stumbled off my feet and into a commando crawl to minimize the chances of being struck by incoming rounds of gunfire. Jim was alone outside as hellfire continued raining down into his downstairs apartment that was occupied by Jody and Blake. Was he hit, I wondered, as I hadn't heard the familiar sound of my SKS he was armed with, returning rounds. While crawling in complete darkness towards my still intact sliding glass door, I reached for my radio and called out to Jim, asking him what his 20 was. Seconds seemed like minutes as I waited and prayed for a response. "Jimmy, do you copy me?" I asked. While nervously waiting, I radioed Jody and asked her if she was okay. Hysterical and crying, she was barely coherent. Stuttering and muttering, she managed to get out the words she was hiding in the bathroom by herself. "Where's Blake?" I called out. I don't know," she replied in a broken and terrified voice. The incoming round sounded even louder and closer coming over the radio transmission. My first initial thought was this had to be the drudgery of the unholy and sinister degenerates that invaded and preyed upon Blake's family. Then again, we are living in Armageddon, and Judgment Day is now filled with way too many habitual, bloodthirsty, homicidal maniacs, I thought to myself. Had some group been observing Jim eating his heaping hot plate of dinner and decided to come take what's ours? By now, I'm sure there was no shortage of desperate individuals in such bad shape that they were willing to try anything to change it. That smiling face from the gas station, just 3 short weeks ago, could now be hell-bent on assassinating you, so they could provide life-saving meals for their famished family. Anarchy, lawlessness, and mutiny could come in the form of complete strangers, or even neighbors, 14 days after the collapse of a civilized society. Either this marauder was firing a fully auto rifle, or there were multiple shooters as the barrage and speed of incoming death-dealing and delivering gunfire began to increase. Night vision goggles would be an absolute critical, game-changing option currently. Unfortunately for me and the homicidal hitmen, that was a prep that was absent from my arsenal. Our only natural light we relied on was presently being obscured by clouds in the sky. Without the innate brightness of the moon shining down, it was complete blackness outside our building. The dystopian darkness concealed and camouflaged our forbidding threat. Getting eyes on my enemies and target selection would be critical to my success in surviving the detrimental ambush. I slowly peeled back, first my blackout curtains, and then the emergency Mylar solar blankets I had hung to help insulate and retain the heat I was generating from my propane heaters. The muzzle flash of gunfire lit up the pitch-black night like fireworks on the 4th of July, revealing 2 shooters' locations. One was hunkered down behind a gas-deprived vehicle to my left at 10 o'clock in our parking lot. A second shooter was secluded at 12 o'clock behind the underground electrical transformer box in the courtyard between our building and the one due east of us. He was less than 40 yards away, bombarding and blasting round after round into Jim's apartment below me. Without some resistance from me, they were mere minutes from marching their way straight into our structure. I still had no eyes or ears on Jim, who was the only one outside when the attack began. My only thought was he was sniped and picked off in the initial rounds of gunfire. Laying on the ground wounded, or worse yet dead, as the hemoglobin of his blood began to saturate, changing the color of the immaculate pure white snow to a sickening and revolting red color. With my group pinned down and members potentially incapacitated, I had to act now. Needing some kind of protection and cover, I hopped to my feet and stumbled by my 3-person tent sleeping quarters to grab my solid oak dining room table. Dragging it back over to my sliding glass door, I flipped it over, laying it on its side, hoping the 1.5 inches of hardwood would provide some much-needed defense and safeguarding. I quietly began to slide the door ajar, and that's when I heard the one predator to my left yell, "Light 'em up!" We'll torch the place and burn them out, pick them off one by one as they're suffering from smoke inhalation. None of them are going to survive through the night. Kill the males and impregnate the females, he said in his sick and sinister voice. He continued to lay down cover as a thug in front of me pulled out a gasoline-filled bottle, concealed in the darkness from me. I steadied the Daniel Defense AR-15 that was intended for Blake on the edge of my table and took aim on the dastardly bastard, who was intent on turning our building into a pile of ashes. He engaged the striker on his Bic and produced a flame that provided just enough light for me to unleash fire and brimstone on him. I took one deep breath in and squeezed the trigger, hoping to drop him before he succeeded in hurling the Molotov cocktail into the downstairs unit. And that's when nothing happened. In the chaos and pandemonium, I had stupidly forgot to pull the charging handle. By the time I realized my foolish and half-witted error, the bottle was lit and sailing through the dark winter apocalyptic night, reaching its destination and exploding through the shattered remnants of the sliding glass door. My empty-headed blunder may have just cost Jody and Blake their lives. By the time I had finally engaged on the monster, a raging inferno was breaking out downstairs from me, soon to spread uncontrollably to our adjoining units, including mine. Time is of the essence to eliminate the threat and safely evacuate what was once our safety and security from the carnage that is doomsday. Their attention and surveillance had now turned to my upstairs unit, as I had proceeded to unload a 20-round capacity magazine in a matter of mere seconds. In between reloading and taking incoming rounds into the table I used to enjoy eating dinners on, I radioed down to Jody and told her she needed to get out of there immediately while she still could. Thick smoke and chest-high flames were engulfing what was once Jim's living room. "Where am I supposed to go?" she cried out. There was only one exit door from our building, and just mere feet from it, an intense, dangerous, and deadly confrontation was taking place. At that point, Blake yelled over the radio saying, "We're coming up. Lay down some cover fire for us, brother." "Copy that," I replied. I slammed another standard round capacity magazine into my battle rifle and began peppering both targets, alternating rounds in each direction. Within 15 seconds, the two of them burst through the door and into the darkness of my apartment. "How bad is the fire?" I anxiously asked the pair while sliding over the Daniel Defense AR-15 to arm Blake with. "The 4-pound fire extinguisher didn't even touch it. The living room furniture is raging, and it's spreading fast," Blake answered. "Then we better end this dogfight immediately and take these two thugs out," I said with a smile. "Where is Jim?" Jody worriedly asked. "Have you seen or heard from him?" "He's dead, isn't he?" as she continued to sob and weep out. "I don't know, Jody," I said in between firing projectiles in pursuit of exterminating the threat. "Right now, I need you to focus and stay with me. We've got them outnumbered, outgunned, and I've got more ammunition than they do. They've got two choices: retreat and flee like cockroaches, or eat lead and meet their maker as we deliver retribution and doom on them. Blake, take position in my bedroom window so we can have multiple lines of gunfire raining down on them. Jody and I will stay here and engage the dirtbag in the parking lot. You take the one out in the courtyard. I need you to take some deep breaths, Jody. You got this. We got this. Safety off and follow my lead." The tide had now turned, and with 3 long guns ejecting rounds, we had them pinned down as the booming echoes of shelling and shooting rumbled throughout our complex. Anyone still hunkered down here 2 weeks in was surely thinking their nightmarish existence in Armageddon was ending tonight. The browbeating bandits were surely hoping we wouldn't be able to remain holed up as the downstairs fire continued to rage. They could wait out our barrage of gunfire, but we couldn't wait out the abyss of flames below us. Expending and trading the blitz of bombardment, we were on borrowed time. I decided it was time to act and take this battle to a more manageable range. I yelled to Blake and Jody to cover me hard and fast, and to Jody's shock, I stepped outside onto the balcony, past the security and cover of the walls and table, and belly flopped over the metal railing, hurling myself 14 feet down to the ground below. The desperation paid off as the shrubs and 2+ feet of fluffy, soft snow cushioned my landing. I immediately jumped to my feet and set my eyes on the target crouched down behind the cover of the snow-covered cars in the parking lot. If I couldn't assassinate him, I tried to flush him out to the wide-open courtyard, hoping Blake could lock on and bury a bullet deep into his body. The intense hotness coming from the hellhole that was once Jim's apartment was generating so much blazing heat it was melting the snow at a rapid pace outside our building. The chirping sound of battery-powered smoke detector alarms triggered from the inferno rang out in between the clamorous sound of gunfire. The scene was complete madness and mayhem as I marched towards my target. Their returning rounds of gunfire had slowed considerably since the attack initiated 10 minutes prior. I quickly scampered across the parking lot, hoping to come up from behind, flanking, and taking the prey I was hunting by surprise. Blake and Jody continued their onslaught of artillery on the confined and now restricted rovers. In the shadow of darkness, 25 feet was all that separated me from the monster I was stalking. Even though I was mere yards away, the midnight darkness of a world without power hid and obscured even the most sinister and ill-omened individuals. That's when his voice gave away his location. He yelled out to his companion in corruption, stating he was low on ammo and it's time to bail. "Let's go, Brandon," he shouted. I sprung forward with eyes and my barrel now positioned on the vile villain. 3 pulls of the trigger followed in succession as I butchered the beast and his body collapsed and crumbled to the snow-covered ground. One threat eliminated in the parking lot, I radioed over to Jody and Blake. Let's turn our attention in bloodthirsty pursuit over to Brandon in the courtyard. He had heard the 3 thunderous, death-dealing rounds I had delivered and knew he had no chance, and his best bet was to flee like the coward he was. He immediately began to bolt as I fired off multiple rounds that failed to land on target. He had a good 30 yards on me as I continued to track him. His only chance to evade the sniping rounds overhead from Blake and Jody was to get as close to our building as possible as I tailed behind. Planking rounds at a stationary target at the gun range and trying to land on a running, evading, eluding human being in the pitch-black darkness of the night were 2 completely different things. Anyone can be a sharpshooter pre-apocalypse in perfect conditions. I couldn't let him escape and risk him returning with reinforcements. The magazine on my battle rifle was empty, and with no time to stop and reload, I was forced to draw my sidearm and try to put a round on him at 30-plus yards as the chase continued. He was putting more distance between us as I was heavily winded, still suffering from the effects of my COVID diagnosis just weeks prior. I knew I couldn't catch him, so I stopped, aimed my Glock as I was breathing heavily, and hoped to put one on center mass, or at least on a limb that would leave a blood trail to track him like he was a wounded deer. I steadied my hands, took a deep breath, and before I could squeeze the trigger, a figure emerged from the bushes and delivered a Herculean whack to the head of Brandon. It was Jimmy. He was alive. He had emerged from the foxhole he had dug out under his deck, where he rode out the attack at. The roasting heat of the fire finally forced him out, and with one mighty swing of the Mosin Nagant, he had incapacitated the threat, knocking him unconscious. "Jimmy, are you okay?" I nervously asked. He's alive, Jody joyfully shouted from my balcony above. "I'm no worse for wear," he answered. When the bullets started flying in abundance and the glass disintegrated, I was a sitting duck. My only option was to dig out a trench and bunker in place under my deck. I was stuck and afraid of the circumstances playing out. Hearing and feeling projectiles whizzing by your head is a different kind of fear and shock. The agitation and terror is indescribable. You're still breathing, and you knocked the shit out of this scumbag. If it wasn't for you and your opportune and heaven-sent timing, I fear he would have evaded us and escaped, as I pointed to the insensible ruffian laying on the ground. The door to Jim's apartment had been foolishly left ajar during the bedlam and violence, allowing the fire to easily advance out into the hallway now and cut off the only entry-exit door to our building, trapping Blake and Jody upstairs in my unit. "You guys gotta jump and get out of there," I yelled. Within minutes, the flames would climb up the stairs, unleashing thick, heavy smoke in an unsurvivable, smoldering firestorm.